When the advisory board started talking initially about social media, I'm going to say it was about 3 years ago, one of the points really was about the inevitable push-pull between franchisees and franchisor on who really should be the voice of the brand, who should handle social media. Each of us was sure we were the right person. It's still a hot topic, but today it's dwarfed with a really bubbling cauldron of other issues. I'm trying to not take this personally, but right after I agreed to work with these fine gentlemen and moderate this panel, all hell broke loose. Just last week, I saw this graphic in the New York Times. So that was on the New York Times, and what it said was, "Can social media be saved?" I really felt that that was a great lead-in for our discussion. And this is, of course, the same time that, as an old person, I'm asking myself if I should delete my Facebook, what that means to the group I have with my employees, and who the hell is Cambridge Analytica and how'd they get this far? So it's no pressure for the panel. They'll answer all these questions, I'm sure. Each panelist will give you a presentation on their area of expertise. We'll discuss the subject a little further between the four of us, and then if we have time, we'll take questions from the audience. We understand, and you should understand, that this topic is evolving right now. It is a bit of a minefield, and we're not going to take the who the hell is Cambridge Analytica question, probably, but we will do our very best to give you more information than you have today and to help you feel a little more armed as you move forward. There's also a panel on Thursday afternoon, entitled How to Incorporate Digital into Your Local Marketing Plan. So if we don't get to what you need today, they will answer all those questions. So without further ado, I'd like to go to our first panelist, Adam. He's a Chief Strategic Officer of Santy Marketing. He's introduced a variety of new tools to uncover insights into customer habits. He advises clients on customer behavior to produce informed and effective campaigns. So Adam, tell us what we need to know.
Absolutely, happy to do it. So we've all heard about Cambridge Analytica. I'm not going to talk about that because I want you all to remain awake. But we're seeing the news of the epic Facebook fail, and what does that mean to everybody? We're reading about people deleting their Facebook and the so-named hashtag that accompanies that. But overall, Facebook has told us that even before all the news broke on the 2-year-old story about Cambridge Analytica, 50 million fewer hours were spent on Facebook around the world before that bad news. So what we can learn from that is people are using social less. If you reflect on your own life, you are probably using social less. And you probably think it's got something to do with trying to free yourself up, but I promise you, you're still just as addicted to your phone. You're just doing different things on it. I'm playing more games. Users down from 80% of Americans were using Facebook in 2017, and at the same time in 2018, it's down to 77% of Americans are using Facebook, which is only a 3% drop times 350 million. It's a big number. That's following also the same trajectory on Facebook, Twitter as well. So people are using social less overall. We're seeing this as a trend across platforms. Why? They did a poll, a company called Lithium did a research study of millennials and Gen Z, or what I call people younger than me, and 74% of them said they actually object to seeing ads in their social feeds. Why? Why do they object to that? Why do you object to it? You signed up for Facebook to initially connect with your college friends, your colleagues, unfortunately your mom and grandma and Aunt Tina, and you wanted to share news, and all of a sudden, guys like me got the idea to start serving you ads on behalf of our clients and putting them in your feed. Well, millennials and Gen Z, almost 3/4 of them said, I hate that, I don't want that. And so half of them said, this was in 2016, that they plan to use less social, and guess what? They're doing it 50 million hours less per month. I don't know about you guys, that's a lot of time. Here's why. We hate ads. I sell ads for a living. People hate ads, therefore, people hate me. I'm okay with it. But what we've seen across all of our clients and across all, we do a lot of businesses like yours as our clients. We also do CPG and healthcare. What we see across all kinds of posting is that user-generated content has been outperforming planned brand content by as much as 7 times. So if we go and we do a photo shoot and we post it, I can pretty much count on the idea that some kid in Skokie, Illinois can walk into a restaurant there and take a picture, and it'll outperform locally to what we could produce because it feels more real, it feels more relevant, because people want to relate to actual people, not to brands. So where are they going? This is a critical question. So as I said to you, they're using less Twitter, less Facebook. They are still going to Instagram, the Facebook-owned picture app, which is a favorite. They're moving to Snapchat, although even growth of Snapchat has shrunk because, guess what? That coincides almost exactly with the launch of their ad platform. But that's where they're going still to connect to people, and then messaging apps like, I have WhatsApp listed up on the screen, but really iMessage, any kind of thing where I can direct message somebody, text somebody, talk to someone directly, talk to my friends. I want to talk to John. I don't want anyone else to know about it. Hey, John, I'm in Vegas for this conference. Let's get a drink. That's what I want. I don't need to broadcast it, and I sure don't want to say, hey, Seth, let's go out and see a movie, and then get 20 movie ads posted to me immediately following from Harkins or from all these theaters. That's not what I'm there for. I'm there to connect with my friends, my peers, my life. So I've put in this chart. The red dot is the one you should look at because this is the young segment, 13 to 24 is up in the top. They are vocal, and they are creating less. Does anybody remember the technographic chart that Forrester created way back at the beginning of social? They had on one end, they had people that were passive consumers, and the goal was to get people to become creators. They would be the active, vocal evangelists that were creating things about your brand. Well, the 25 to 34-year-olds were kind of peak creators, and now the 13 to 24-year-olds are opting out of that. They don't want that. They want to come, they want to be vocal, they want to talk about the brand, but they're not going to make a video, they're not going to make a movie, even though they're the most empowered generation to have that technology to easily do it. It's boring to them. They don't want to do it. They're the ones that are pulling back from social and changing things. So if we think about this another way, if we think about the beginning of social, I have it as roughly 2007, which is when Facebook became public and broke out of college students only. It was really passive consumption. And then we got into the creating phase where people were asked to, remember this, share a picture of your experience, ultimately culminating in like the hashtag your image, tag the brand with this, hashtag this, make a video, right? That kind of died out in 2015. Now people are just looking to engage. So what does that look like? How are we going to move that forward? If you're a brand and you're trying to get people into if you're running a store, and how are you going to get people into the store using social? What tools can you still use? Good news, bad news. This is kind of what social looked like in 2012, a produced image of this salad and some kind of quippy headline like, fork, fork, fork or something. I think that was what it said. Bad news. This was actually posted last week. It has like no likes or shares or anything. So this is a brand, I'm not going to name the brand, but this is a brand that is not keeping up with how people want to interact on social. In 2016, we started to see brands catching on to the idea that UGC and influencer content was growing, getting more results, and getting better performance on social platforms. Therefore, they started to mime it. This is Mod Pizza doing a great job of taking a lot of candid shots, or what I call plandids, and making it feel like UGC, making it feel like you're actually in the store, showing you the real pizza off of their line, out of their oven, so you get a sense of the memory of like what it's like to actually be there and not have a food stylist puzzling over the thing with tweezers and putting the pepperoni exactly where it belongs. This is what it really looks like. That beer looks delicious. I'm going to have one. But in 2017, we saw a totally new switch. Chris Sean Hayes had some kind of a complaint. He took it right to Red Robin. I beg you to find me after this talk. I will tell you my Red Robin story. I don't have time to do it now, but I am the reason that Red Robin now responds to every single tweet. We're sorry to disappoint, they said. Please DM us your name. Chris Sean Hayes had a problem. He brought it right to them directly. The same way I would go to John and say, hey, I was waiting for you at this restaurant, where are you? And he would respond, sorry, I disappointed you. I got hung up, I had a flat tire, whatever it was. Finally, this is where we're going. Amika on Twitter reached out to Wendy's and she said, miss you, Wendy's. And Wendy's replies, come hang. Conversational. It's how two friends relate. It's not how a brand or a restaurant or salon reaches out to a customer and says, please find the coupon attached for $1 off your next haircut. It is, hey, come hang, we miss you too, bro. Let's be pals. This is where it's all going. So up next, you're going to hear from John Carroll, who's going to talk about Yelp and how things have been changing in this conversational way. And then we're also going to be looking at the ways that we can be using this kind of social approach internally to help foster a culture inside the organization that can grow and be strong. I'm going to hand it off to you, John.
Thank you.
Can I just comment that thank you, sorry.
My pleasure.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with sharing your Facebook with your mother. Nothing wrong at all. I convinced my children, my daughters both accepted the idea right away. My son, after making horrible faces, agreed, and then said under his breath, but good luck, I hid all my pictures. So it is a difference in how generations look at things and what we want. I did want to see his pictures.
You should psychographically retarget him that sharing your information with your mom is cool.
Thank you. I think that's a great idea. He needs a little help.
All right. My name is John Carroll. I work at Yelp, and we are going to talk about the future of feedback. This is me. I only own one outfit. Get used to it. I love it. So, as I mentioned, I work at Yelp. I'm a brand evangelist and senior manager of business outreach. And if you want to connect with me, a great way to do that is our @YelpForBusiness Twitter handle, because that's one of my side projects, one of the many hats that I wear at Yelp. And I am so excited to be in Las Vegas. And part of the reason I'm so excited to be in Las Vegas is because there are so many really incredible things about this city, right? I mean, the first time I came here, you see these huge casinos, and I've just never seen anything on that scale before. But really the most important and meaningful and impressive thing about Las Vegas are the buffets, right? Who here has been to a Las Vegas buffet? Man, I went for my first time on my last trip here, and you had to roll me to the airport. It was absolutely horrible. It was carnal. Talk about the 7 deadly sins. The 8th is buffets. So my love of buffets is going to be very, very, very important throughout this presentation. But before we get to that, we're going to talk about something near and dear to my heart as somebody who works for Yelp, and that is feedback, right? Because that's all Yelp is. It's another customer contact point. It's another touch point. It's a way for you to get feedback on a location level about your businesses, about your franchises, about your brand. And when you think about, I was just at CVS the other day, and I bought 2 things, deodorant and body wash, and my receipt was almost as tall as I was. And the reason for that is because big brands know and understand the value of feedback, right? They really want you to take that online survey at the bottom of the thing, or you can call them, or whatever the option is. They'll give you $50,000 just if you tell them how they did. What an incredible deal. The odds on those are probably phenomenal, because I can't name anybody who actually takes them. So highly recommend you do. That can be your one takeaway from this presentation. But when I think about feedback, I think about feedback in a few different ways. I think about feedback from a direct feedback perspective. So the direct feedback is me directly interacting with and engaging with you or your brand, right? It's me having an immediate conversation with you. I really like your striped blouse. Like, that is direct feedback, because I'm giving that feedback directly to you. Your necklace is really cool. That is direct feedback. And then you have indirect feedback. And if you want to learn about indirect feedback, my boyfriend is an expert on indirect feedback, because when when we're having a conversation and I'm not particularly happy about something, typically it looks something like this, right? I think your spouses or your significant others are probably all experts in indirect feedback and using that as communication. And indirect feedback is really a lot more valuable, right? Because it doesn't take me having to say something like, I'm really upset at you, or this really bothered me, for him to understand, or for your significant other to understand that something is wrong, or that something was right, or that there's an opportunity there, or to kind of learn without having to have that really onerous, heavy-handed experience or engagement that you could be doing something differently or doing something better. So, as we love to do in Silicon Valley, I put all of this into a framework. And the other dimension of the framework is the visibility of feedback. So feedback can either be high visibility feedback or low visibility feedback. And I'm going to walk through some examples of what this looks like once we take a look at this framework. So this is probably really the most valuable thing that I talk about with businesses. So when we think about feedback, as we said, we have direct feedback and we have indirect feedback, and then we have high visibility and low visibility. You always want to be up and to the right? That's always where you want your graph to go. But when you think about high visibility, direct feedback, that's like me filling out a comment card. So say, for example, I'm at one of these famous Las Vegas buffets, and I go through my experience, and I want to reach out to the brand, and I say, this was such an incredible time. You changed my life. I had to buy 2 pairs of jeans after this, both a size larger. You did your job. If I do that type of feedback for a business is going to be direct, high visibility, because I'm engaging with that brand one-on-one, right? I'm telling them through a channel that they own, through a channel that they're monitoring, exactly what my experience was. This type of feedback is going away, right? This is the type of feedback that you relish over and you dream of, but it's just out of reach. I did a presentation like this about, it was called the Future Feedback also, and it was to an audience of presentation and meeting planners. And those meeting planners were like, John, how do I get more feedback? How do I get more people to take my survey? There were 200 people in that audience. Guess how many of them actually filled out the post-meeting survey about my session? 6. 200 people, desperate, hungry for feedback themselves, and 6 of them actually took the time to fill out the survey. And it's because filling out surveys is horrible, right? It is not fun. Like, that is not a good time to me. I've never met a single person who's like, 10 out of 10, filling out surveys. I love that. And you cannot give away enough Amazon Echoes or whatever they are to get people to fill out your surveys, just because that is not what is native, what people like to do. People like to communicate in the channels that they're already using with the methods that they're already using. So let's look at our next type of feedback. So what type of feedback do you think this image represents? So we're at the buffet. I'm looking at a few items on here, and I'm trying to figure out what one is the most popular, right? I only have 2 hands. I can roughly balance 4 plates. So which one is going to get some space on one of my 4 plates? Well, it would look like these parfaits on the left are probably one of the more popular items, so I'm going to guess that these are pretty good. Maybe carrot juice? Okay, I'm not at a buffet for carrot juice, so I'm going to skip that probably. And then, God forbid that's beet juice. Make better choices, right? Just holistically make better choices with your life. This type of feedback is indirect but highly visible, right? Because I, as a consumer or an employee working this buffet, can say, oh, you know what? The parfaits were really popular. In your POS systems, you're able to track this type of data. But only if you actually have the systems and tools in place to measure it. This type of data is all around us. It's just whether or not we have the tools and systems to take the time to measure that. So let's say I'm going for a sampling of desserts, modest sampling. This is like the amuse-bouche of desserts, if you will, because you know I'm probably going to get 2 more plates of this too. And let's say 3 of them were phenomenal, but 1 of them ends up in the trash, unfortunately. What type of feedback is that, right? How does a business monitor that? Well, unless you're actually asking your employees and saying, when you were clearing the plates, what was the thing that was left on the table? You know, what did they leave on their plates? What were you throwing most out of in the back when you were washing the dishes? You would have no idea. And that's really valuable, because maybe something that's a really popular menu item, maybe it's actually spoiled. Or maybe, you know, something's just off with it. Or maybe it's really appealing, and they're taking it from that buffet in the first pass, but they're not actually consuming it because it's just not good. So there's a little bit of dissonance between like the promise and what was actually delivered. This is indirect, low visibility feedback, right? Because unless you have an additional system, unless you're empowering somebody to bubble this type of feedback up, or you're measuring this in some additional way yourself, you would have no idea. Because that POS type data, where you're just seeing what's taken off your line or how often you're refilling that station, that is only half of this story. So if you're only paying attention to that highly visible component of it, you're missing this entire other narrative that is really important and really impactful to your bottom line. And then finally, I work for Yelp, right? What type of feedback is somebody going online and leaving an online review? Well, that's going to be direct, low visibility. And as a brand or as a business, what you want to do is you want to move these things that are direct into your high visibility purview. So that means you want to claim your Yelp pages and all of your online review pages. You want to claim those, you want to do some social listening, you want to set up a Google alert for your brand name in each of your markets. You want to make sure that you're paying attention in the channels where people are trying to talk about you and communicate with you, because that's the only way you're truly going to be able to read the sentiment of their experience with your brand. And then the other opportunity is increased measurement. Empowering your employees who are on the front line to bubble this feedback up. And part of the most important way that you do that is making sure that they're receiving feedback from the top down, that you have an organizational culture where feedback is valued. Because the people who have the best ideas, the people who make the most incremental and meaningful changes in an organization, are typically the people who are on the front lines. It's not the CEO in the office thinking, how can I redirect this entire business? It's those small, little micro movements that ultimately move the needle the most. Because that one big sweeping idea is typically very expensive to implement and very time-consuming to implement. But those small little operational efficiencies and those small little ideas from the front line directly are the ones that ultimately impact a business the most. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Seth.
Are we doing a little intro? Or no?
I was going to, if you want me
Please,
to. Okay,
please.
yeah. Try to look mesmerized while I do it. Seth Mattison is a founder and chief movement officer at FutureSight Labs, an internationally renowned expert on workforce trends and generational dynamics. He could probably advise me about my son. He advises many leading brands on key shifts in talent management, change and innovation, leadership, and the future of work. And if you're a franchisee, you're going to be lucky enough to also be able to listen to more of his ideas during our lunch.
So you missed that.
You did. I was going to do a really good job for you.
Sorry.
Good morning, everyone. So how many of you had a chance to see me back in 2017? Do I have some familiar faces just so I can get a little bit of a gauge? Okay, so there's a lot of you that haven't. That's great. We get a chance to get acquainted. Thank you for that warm intro. Cheryl briefly mentioned my organization, FutureSight Labs. We've spent the last decade essentially studying, researching, writing, looking at category-leading brands and spending time with high-performing leaders with a really specific mission. Our whole purpose, every day we wake up with a focus to help leaders navigate the future of work. Period, end of story. Help leaders navigate the future of work. What are the skills and competencies we need as owner-operators in order to lead great organizations? And then how do we create a high-performance culture to ultimately drive the business? And as we were talking about social media and where it's going and thinking where could I add a little perspective to the conversation, where I felt we could help was in thinking about how we use these tools with our internal customers. Adam and John did a great job of kind of giving a state of the industry, where are we at as it relates to social, and then thinking about feedback and moving closer to our customers in the marketplace. And what I want to have us do is I want to have us consider how are we using these tools inside of our organizations for our internal customers, our employees. This idea of elevating engagement and shaping culture. Now let me ask you a question. How many of you, your engagement levels with your employees, your staff, and your culture is important to you? How many of you would say your culture, how many of you would go so far as to say, and I'm actually going to come down, if you want to bring up the house lights, if we can do that at all, how many of you would say your culture is a part of the secret sauce that gives you a competitive advantage? Okay, raise your hands high for me, just so we can, perfect. You look around and be like, culture is a part of what differentiates. Perfect, I completely agree with that. And so then the question you're maybe wondering is like, okay, I get it, dude. Culture, engagement, it's important to me. How does that blend with this idea of social media? Essentially, social media, these are just new tools to amplify and connect us to one another around us. And these tools are going to continue to evolve and change. It's Facebook, it's Twitter, it's Yelp for feedback and reviews, it's Instagram, it's Snapchat. There'll be 5 more as we move forward into the future. They will continue to change. But the point is, the lines between our personal life, our professional life, they're blurring, right? When I go home, I'm at work. Some of you are feeling that. When am I on? When am I off? When am I in my professional self? When am I in my personal mode? All of this now, life is just all one thing. So how do we utilize these tools to help you in one of the key areas that gives you a competitive advantage in the marketplace? What I want to get you thinking is this idea of social, essentially, it extends your reach and it amplifies your impact as a leader and an influencer inside of your business. This is how I want you to be thinking. Now let's look at these two very briefly. This idea of engagement and culture. Almost every person in this room raised your hand. You said it's important to you. You see it as one of your competitive advantages. Let's just take engagement. On both of these, I love to ask people, how would you define engagement? And I often find is that very rarely do we have one clear definition. We kind of give a mishmash of definitions as to what it is. And so I just want to level set. What is engagement? Engagement is essentially the degree to which employees are psychologically invested. And I see people taking pictures already, which is great. Are we going to make this deck available afterwards? If not, we should. And certainly you can get these slides because I want you to have them. Psychologically invested in the success of your business. Right? They're bought in. And I'll take it one step farther. If we get engagement right, what happens? This is where I live and breathe with my organization. What am I looking for? It results in discretionary effort. Discretionary effort toward attaining our vision, our goal. Now, what's discretionary effort? Anybody just want to give me like a guess as to how you would define? What is discretionary effort? A willingness to do what? Something extra, right? To go above and beyond. Yes, you pay me to do X. I'm meeting the job description. I did what you asked me. I checked off the list of all of my to-dos. What I'm looking for are who are the employees that when they get done doing what they're supposed to with the job description, they're looking over the restaurant. Or they're looking over the business and they're saying, what else could I be doing? Oh, the floor is dirty. I'm going to, unprompted, I'm going to go pick up a broom and sweep the floor. I'm going to go wipe a table down. I'm going to go help a teammate. Raise your hands if you'd like a few more of those employees who are looking for this unprompted. Discretionary effort, right? This is why this matters. It comes out of engagement. Now, what are the drivers of engagement? It's not a mystery. There are actually really specific things that we can do every single day that can increase and amplify engagement. What do they look like? Well, here are the 6. This is just recent research. Top engagement drivers across generations. Top 6. And I'm going to zero in on the top 3 to just briefly touch on. Because these are hypercritical that you can lean into the second you go back home. Number 1, I have confidence in senior management. Number 2, I can grow and develop opportunities to learn and grow. And number 3, I have confidence in the future of the organization. Right? So you look at number 1 and number 3. Right? What's driving engagement? People saying, I feel confident in you and in the direction of where this organization is going. I believe that we're going in the right direction, and you are the leader that is going to take us there. If you think about it, it makes sense because in our lives, when we don't feel that where we are is a safe place, if your employees don't feel like the moves that we're making, the decisions that are getting made, or the manager that I'm following is going to lead us to the promised land, what do people do? What behaviors start to show up? If our confidence is, if we're fearful of our future, what do people start to do? What do they do? They depart, they start looking for what? Other jobs, right? We start, in some of our cultures, depending upon where you are, when we're fearful for our security, the other thing that starts to happen, and this shows up in nature. In nature, when there is scarcity or we're fearful for our future, animals do this as well. What's the action we take? We start to hoard. We start to hoard. We go into protection mode. And inside a culture, inside a business, we're not hoarding food and shelter. What are we hoarding? Ideas, support, right? Looking for ways to pour into one another. Right? We go into protection mode. Confidence in senior leadership and the future of the organization. And that second piece of opportunities to learn and grow. So if I look at that and I say these are key drivers of engagement, and we're having a conversation around social media, I'm thinking to myself, these are simply tools to help me amplify my influence and my impact. So how am I using these new tools to offer opportunities for people to keep learning and growing and level up? How am I using these tools to instill confidence in myself, my managers? Are they equipped to use any of these tools? Not to just blast out generic information, but with really specific, intentional focus. Engagement drivers. Now, part of the reason this is really tricky outside of social media, was particularly when we talk about this idea of confidence in the future and in senior leaders, two big reasons this is difficult for all of us today. Number one, Harvard Business Review just came out with a new statistic. This is not my number, this is their number. They found this is a North America-based statistic, across industries, 70% of managers today are uncomfortable talking to employees. Let me say that number again. 70% of managers say they are uncomfortable talking to employees. Some of you are thinking about your management teams right now, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can think of a few. Now, how in the world we can offer up new tools for them to communicate and amplify confidence in the future if they're not even comfortable having a face-to-face conversation in your restaurant, in your store? How in the world is it going to come across through one of the social channels? So how are we training around that? How am I thinking, where are my managers' communication skills before I try to plug them into some new tools? The second reason this is incredibly difficult for all of us today, particularly as owner-operators, is that we are entering an era where we are experiencing a crisis of trust. Right? There is a crisis of trust in our world today. This is not a US-based epidemic, this is global. And all you have to do is look to the greatest trust research study that comes out every year, put out by Edelman. Edelman's Trust Barometer, they're going on now their second decade, 20 years of studying trust around the world. And what I love about Edelman is they always brand each year a theme. Right? Last year it was trust in crisis. This year was branded the battle for truth. How many of you are operating in the US? Raise your hands. US operators. Perfect. So in the United States, between 2017 and 2018, we saw a 23% dip in trust across the institutions. 23% dip. Just to put that in perspective, we've never seen more than a 5 to 6% movement year over year. 23% dip. 55% of CEOs today say they are worried that, and let's pop forward to that next component on this build, are worried that lack of trust is a threat to the organization's growth. 7 out of 10 around the world are worried that false or fake news will be used as a weapon against their organization. So in a world that is becoming less trusting of institutions, and when we say institutions, what do we mean? The 4 big institutions that Edelman looks at, they're looking at media, government, NGOs, which the primary one that comes forward there is typically religion, and corporations, leaders. So government, media, religion, and corporations and leaders. How are we showing up every single day with the mindset of establishing trust when we're in an era of crisis around it? And how can I start to use these tools? Right? A big common theme you're hearing here is around authenticity. Right? Authenticity, it's no longer a nicety, it's required. So how do we show up as our most real, authentic self? Not just because it's nice, not just because it's going to create more shares, but because it is critical from a standpoint of engagement. Now, the second component of this, we're talking about elevating engagement. Second piece, briefly touch on culture, and this idea of shaping culture. Very briefly, this idea of culture, and this is another one of those we could ask every person in this room to define culture. We would probably get 700 different responses and definitions of what culture means. culture, in a nutshell, if we were to summarize it, culture is really about experiences that are taking place inside of your operation. Culture is about experiences. And why does it matter? Why should we care? And if I dovetail off of conversations thinking about social media in the marketplace, tie it back and tie the bow between internal and external. I don't want you to forget this line. The experiences that we create as leaders, right? The experiences we create for our talent, right? It mirrors the experience the brand creates for its customers. The experiences every day that we create for our employees, for our talent, it mirrors the experience the brand creates for our customers in the marketplace. Put another way to think about it, employee and customer experience are a reflection of culture, and culture is a reflection of leadership. It starts with us, right? So every time, if you start to take ownership over this, every time we see a Yelp review that is not the most positive Yelp review on the planet, all we need to do is walk into the bathroom, turn on the light, and look directly into the mirror. That's all. That's where we start. How do I have to start showing up? What are the policies, the procedures? How do I take more ownership over this? Because it comes right back to leadership, right? Culture is a reflection of leadership. I'm wondering, how in the world do I shape culture? I'll give you my favorite definition for how to define culture, because what I find most often is people define culture, if they feel like they have a great culture, especially in small businesses, we have a tendency to say what? They say, Seth, we're like a what? We're like a family. We're like a family. Raise your hands if you'd maybe say that. You're like, yeah, we are. And we take pride in that, yes. And there's nothing wrong with that. I get it when people say that, but let me ask you this question. What does a family feel like? Because I know some people with some really shitty families. What does a family feel like? We're not a family. Netflix has one of the greatest culture maps defining we've seen across industries. And they specifically say, we are not a family, we are like a pro sports team. We love each other, we support each other, but we hold each other accountable. This is not a family. We create elevated expectations for one another. How do you actually shape it? This is, you can go back and change your business with this simple line. Get clear on this. Culture is the formal or informal, agreed upon attitudes and behaviors that are either rewarded or corrected inside of the organization. The formal or informal, agreed upon. Agreed upon means what? That they are actually known and understood. Everyone is aligned to them. They're not four values that hang in the back of the kitchen that no one looks at and collects dust. They live and breathe every single day inside the organization. They're known and shared. I'll give you a good example in the franchising world. I was here back in 2017, had an opportunity to meet Mike Rotundo. How many of you know Mike Rotundo? Tropical Smoothie Cafe! Yeah, baby. You want to talk about a brand that lives and breathes this every single day, right? Four very specific values: solid relationships, creative spirit, playing to win, living better. And you know what? They go on to define what those mean. Those are kind of high level, but this is all over the place. You go to their About section, what is it? It's Mike talking about these values. And if you're going to work here, you have to embody and embed, and we're going to agree upon it. Not just be an employee here. You want to be a vendor? You want to work with us? This is what we look for from our vendors. Everyone knows and understands this. So I'll go back to social media. How does this connect? How do I use these tools? And we're going to have some dialogues around this to amplify, extend, communicate, share, right? Evangelize, get buy-in, and celebrate these values every single day. Right? They're just tools to help you extend your reach. They're not going to stop doing it in the physical space, but today we've been gifted the unbelievable opportunity to use all of these tools, right, to carry forward a message. My final slide, and then I'll shut up. The social shift. Let's shift out of defense and get on the offensive when it comes to social media. We started looking at all of the stuff that came up when we're going to be on this social media panel. And where do we default to? And that's not to make light of the challenges. There are challenges. But what's really easy to do is just, we're in defense. And like, where are all the places that things can go wrong and that I have no control over? I'm constantly asking myself this: what can I control? Move on the offense. Start owning this. If I set a culture in place that is already going to weed out people who will, on the back end, do something with social media that I'm not going to feel good about, I knew that on the front end because I was so clear on my values and we shared and articulated every single day. I cut off the problems before they even get there. And we got to start recruiting and looking for leaders that embody this every single day. You're recruiting leaders that have a digital mindset. Recruiting leaders that can live and breathe and use these tools every day. And if you don't currently have this skill set, we've got training in place to raise and level up our skill set. Let's get into the questions.
Okay. So you can see that we have three gentlemen well versed in their areas of expertise, and between them all have strong opinions on what we do next. But let's just say that we're a room half filled with franchisees, half filled with franchisors. Our brand voice is a push-pull between us. Certainly when we bring up the word authentic, it maybe makes all of us franchisees say, we know how to be authentic. And the franchisors say, oh God, we need to control you before you're too authentic. So gentlemen, knowing that your audience is split this way, and knowing that there's such dramatic changes in each of the big social media platforms, if we're trying to get out an external message first, what would each of you think is the way to start? What would be your first sort of bullet point advice to this group? Start at the end?
Sure. Bullet point advice is tough to give in social media because it's an
Understood.
ocean. But as I showed you that user-generated content or influencer content is outperforming, it's because I can relate it to my life. It feels like something I can connect with. The image of the employee at Mod Pizza eating the actual slice of pizza, I can connect to that. I have a memory of that. So to actually start producing things that connect with people, local is better. As someone who manages franchisee organization social presence, it puts the fear of God into me when they say, hey, the franchisees may post from time to time. I have to admit that, as you're right, as a control element, it scares me because who knows what's going to get posted. But consumers want that. Consumers want, the word authenticity kind of gives me hives, but the idea that it's something that I can connect with, something that feels like, oh, I know that, that's the store around the corner for me. That's what I want as a consumer, and that's what brands need to do, is be real and show you a little bit of peek behind the curtain.
Great, thank you.
I think it's an institutional and an organizational change that has to happen first. I think I definitely agree with you that the authenticity and that ownership is a really important thing, but it is scary to kind of let it go and not know what is going to be posted out there. But from a consumer perspective, the more personal that experience is, the better. And I'm thinking specifically about responding to reviews. So if you get a store manager or an owner-operator who's saying, you know, I'm sorry that you had this experience, I'm the owner, or I own this location, like, I would like to reach out to you and resolve this specifically. That's much more meaningful than, you know, Cheryl S. from customer service team Y saying, you know, we're really sorry that you had this experience, you know, best of luck in your future endeavors. So I think the first step is to organizationally figure out what that comfort level is and what that threshold is, and then draw up guidelines of, if you are going to post as a franchisee, like, here are the things that as a corporate office we think are acceptable posts, and here are the common pitfalls of where this can go very, very wrong for our brand, and at least starting there.
Thank you. And Seth, I'm figuring you have an opinion?
It goes back to the very beginning. As franchisors that are in the room, you know, you're all looking to grow your businesses, and as you're evaluating potential franchisees, and there's all, you know, the criteria that you've developed and built out of who would represent, who's reflective of the type of individuals and would build a culture that's reflective of you, what you want. It goes back to having clearly established values, behaviors, virtues, whatever you want. But now they're extending far beyond just how we expect you to show up and lead your organization, because it should be reflective of our vision. It just exactly exactly to your point, John, is you're also building out guidelines and a vision for how you amplify that into the marketplace. So are we having to communicate more? Are we having to spend more time to get more clear? It's also creating a moment where we have to pause and we have to step back and to say, what is our vision of that? What are our values? What are the rules of engagement? We haven't had to stop and think about this, Seth, before. And again, everyone in this room is so busy, it's easy to default to, I just don't have time to do that. And we hope people use their best judgment. Hope's not a great strategy on that front, right? So now it just becomes embedded into your process from the very beginning, from the recruiting of potential franchisees, from those early conversations, we're talking about all of this. And that, I think, puts us in a position to cut off challenges farther down the road.
I'm sure I just created a whole bunch more conversations that are going to be occurring, but it is very hard to be authentic through a third party, and it's very hard to be authentic through your franchisor who maybe doesn't have the information you have right at that moment. And what do you think is the current best medium for employee team engagement? I'm feeling really good here that I could say that when I interviewed Seth, or when Seth interviewed me, I made it really clear that we used Facebook and we felt it was really successful, and we call our organization a family. Feeling really good about that now. But if we're all going to go home and do a better job, what is the vehicle we should be using for employee engagement besides obviously our own face-to-face conversation, which is, irreplaceable. But if we're using something else, what should it look like? And what would you say the most important part is about that kind of engagement?
I'm going to just toss to you guys first, just if you've got any thoughts on that internally.
Because he's going to take us to lunch with his answer.
No, I'm not. I promise I won't.
I'm going to start so you don't say mine. So that is very much my strategy right now. Slack is a wonderful tool for organizations. And I think one of the biggest or the missed opportunities for companies is actually kind of scheduling your own content and having a Slack content calendar of what are the different activations you want to create in that space for your team. So for those of you who might not know what Slack is, it's an app that you download, and it's a collaborative kind of workspace. So you can share files, you can share media, things like that, all within this space, and it's really easy for your team to access it, and it's also free up to a certain level of usage. So for me, it's getting everybody on board with that, and then also sharing things regularly so you're encouraging engagement within that channel. And also, once you kind of pave the path and get people to recognize this, it's also a great way to share feedback and share team wins, and get people sharing their own feedback and their own team wins. Totally. But the most important thing is that you as a leader have to be the most engaged person there. You are leading by example through and through. So it's every time somebody posts something, you should be challenge yourself to be the first person to engage with it. Challenge yourself to do that.
And so we don't want to lose people in the audience who are now saying, I don't know what Slack is. I already forgot my Facebook password. I can't take any more learning. Slack is really easy. I know that because my daughter told me, you should be using Slack. And then she told me, watch these 5 YouTube vignettes, really short, 2-3 minutes. They'll tell you everything you need to know. You don't need to call me again.
Or message her on Facebook.
Yes, or message her on Facebook. But now I message her on Slack, and I get some sort of attaboys every time I do it. That's a great idea, and it is something you should look at. Easier than you think, and more current.
Yeah,
Yes.
I was not going to say Slack, but it's the right answer if the answer is you should meet them where they are. You should meet your staff in the place they are. So Slack is a great answer for my team that I manage because they all love Slack. I don't like Slack, but I use it because I know I can get to them and lead by example and be a part of that conversation that's happening there. Terrible things happen when there's a channel and there's no leadership in that channel. That's when the values get distorted, or the ideas or the gossip mill kind of tends to happen in those places. Gossip doesn't happen in the central kitchen that everybody shares. It happens off in the back corner where nobody goes. It happens off on the side. So if you're trying to engage using social or using any kind of digital communication tool, it's meet them where they are. If everybody's on Snap, you better get on Snap and figure out how to engage with them there. If it's all just texting, start a group text. I mean, it's really leading and being where they are, or being where your team is, and trying to communicate on their level.
I couldn't agree more. Meet them where they are. We could say Facebook, you could have established a group and a page. It could be Slack. It could be, some of you are large enough, maybe you've got an internal social collaboration tool that you're using, and that's where it all happens.
Right.
I think the bigger underlying piece for all of us in this room as owner-operators, regardless of the tool, it comes down to two things: time and a willingness to be courageous enough to be uncomfortable, right? And when we say time, there's not a person in this room who's thinking, I barely have enough time to get through all the things I need to get through, and now you're telling me I need to get on Slack and be immediately. All you have to do is, you can tell me what is important to you. All we have to do is look at your calendar. What you schedule and what you make time for shows the world what you value and what's most important to you. Right? Everybody has the same 24 hours. I think one of the best places to start is, if this is important to you, for growing the business, amplifying connection, not only with customers in the marketplace, but shaping engagement and culture internally, is you schedule, not just loosely in your mind, but in your calendar every day. You have 30 minutes, you have an hour, whatever it is, but it's in your calendar, and it is sacred. Nothing gets to break into it, and you get in, and you are secondarily courageous enough to experiment with this stuff. Because what gets really hard as we get older, and the more successful we are, it's hard to do stuff that we're not good at. Because it makes us look foolish. It makes us feel silly. It makes us feel dumb. Like, I'm gonna put a video out there, and what if I look like a moron, Seth? Maybe you can't even articulate that out loud, but we're all thinking that. I'm gonna put this out there, and what are people gonna think? We have to, and this is where we give you all the tools. If you don't go out and like do that and say, can I be willing to just make myself feel a little bit uncomfortable once a day around this front? I'm gonna experiment just a little bit because it matters to my business. You have to start there. Be courageous and schedule the time. Put it on your freaking calendar. Otherwise, stop complaining about it.
I think, by the way, that same word that we're going to use for reaching out to consumers is even more important when we're looking inside our own organization. So having somebody else post for you to your people just doesn't work. It's got to be you, and it's got to be your feeling. So I can tie into a conversation. The only thing I could ever probably hold a conversation with George Will about is baseball. I'm in Southern California. I'm a San Francisco Giants fan, and I'm a rabid San Francisco Giants fan. And my people know that, and they think it's fun to make fun of me and to give me a good poke, and I poke back. And at first I stared at it and said, uh-oh, this is not gonna go well. And then I realized, but that's who I am. And so they know about what Joey and I are doing and what our kids are doing, because that's who we are. So I think sometimes it's even more difficult to take that step and be authentic than it is to even learn Slack. Slack is a little bit easier. But I would say, as we're using up our time, that what you're hearing is you have to stay current. You have to ask somebody maybe who's younger than you. And yes, my children are my advisors in this area, because they tell me what's current. And they said, hey, once Snap changed its platform, it sucks now, don't learn it. I was like, yes, cross it off.
One less.
But it's important that we keep up and we know what's going on, and that we are ourselves, and that we are authentic. So thank you, gentlemen. You are brilliant. I appreciate it. And I'm really lucky because I have their email, and I'll be able to keep in touch with them all the time now and get better answers so that I don't talk about my employee family anymore. And I thought that was so cool, too. So thank you very much. I appreciate your willingness to help out. You'll have more social if you're a franchisee at lunchtime. And then tomorrow afternoon, an additional panel on social media, because we know it's important and we know it's evolving. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time.